Please welcome Porter Gale, marketing expert.
Everybody. Thanks for having me. I know a lot of you. My name's Porter Gale, and most recently I was the head of marketing at Virgin America. But I'm not going to talk about airlines today. I have two amazing panelists with me, and so I'm going to introduce them. I think you're going to love this panel. All right. So my first panelist, she's doing incredible work. She is the executive director of a group called Scientists Without Borders. Her name is Shaifali Puri. And Scientists Without Borders, if you haven't heard about it, what they're doing is they're bringing about 20,000 scientists around the globe together through technology and solving global issues. So please give her a big round of applause. Thank you. So glad to have you here today. All right. My next panelist, I think some of you will recognize him. He's been an on-air and on-stage actor, comedian. He currently has a show on Current TV. His name is John Fugelsang, so please give him a big round of applause. Thank you. All right, I'm so glad to have you both here.
This is the one gig where if no one looks up from their tablet, it's a good sign.
Exactly, everybody's tweeting. With that, why don't we can you guys share your Twitter handles in case anyone wants to tweet today while we're chatting?
Sure, we're at Sci Without Board, formerly a Star Trek character, I think.
Perfect.
I'm at John Fugelsang, but that involves knowing how to spell Fugelsang, so I apologize to the room.
Great, great. Well, what I wanted to talk about today, obviously this is a conference where we're talking about social business and social good, but my two panelists, I've been so impressed with what they're doing. They're actually trying to create a lot of positive change. They've been using technology in interesting ways. So we're going to talk about that, how technology's changed what you're doing. So first, if you could both give me a little background on what you're doing. So tell us what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep. So we connect science and technology assets, expertise, and resources around the world to solve the most urgent global development challenges. So the really basic baseline needs: nutrition, clean water, sanitation. And we do that by leveraging a web-based platform and connection technology to connect scientists, technologists, people working in the field, and enable them to crowdsource and open source share solutions, ideas, and resources. And then we work with big partners, foundations, multinational corporations, governments, to try to bring an innovation-based approach, often driven by digital technology and changes in the technological landscape, to kind of bring new ways of doing kind of the old work of global development.
Right. Great, that's a big shift. I mean, I think of a lot of scientists in the past, it's my own perception, but maybe a little bit more competitive instead of collaborative. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think there has been a massive shift. I think big enterprise science has often been built on this idea of IP protection and things in the labs, but science itself is inherently a collaborative exercise. You know, you build on the citation and the work of others, you collaborate with people at different research institutions. So I don't think that we're sort of introducing a cultural element that's completely foreign. I think what's very interesting about what we're doing and what technology enables is, one, infinitely more people can on-road to the problem. So not just, say, a malaria expert, but someone who doesn't know really very much about malaria, but if is given a challenge where their expertise may be relevant. And then this notion of being able to connect to a problem or to other people, because that's what social media does really well.
Now, John, you, I know, have a show that's once a week, but you told me backstage you're doing a daily show coming up, correct?
Yes, I'll be launching a daily series on Current TV come next month in November. And I'm glad that you have a scientist devoted to helping the world's problems and dealing with dwindling resources and the suffering of the third world, and then have me on for balance. I'm here more as a comedian and an entertainer to talk about how in my field people have used Twitter both to spread their own propaganda and the causes they believe in. I'm primarily a political comic, and for me, I found both Twitter and Facebook to be invaluable on the entertainment level, beyond just the desperate need to promote oneself and promote one's gigs. we launched a tour last year with Stephanie Miller and Hal Sparks and Aisha Tyler called the Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour, which we promoted only using the host's radio show and then social media. Went on to gross over $1.5 million the first year and get 4 Pollstar nominations. Our album became the first political comedy album to ever reach #1 on Amazon, iTunes, and Billboard. We donated a portion of the proceeds from every gig to a local cause, be it marriage equality, animal rescue, Trevor Project for LBGT suicide prevention. And we were able to get the album to hit #1 on all 3 of those comedy charts only using social media. Likewise, as a political comedian, one of my crusades is going up against the hypocrisy of the religious right. I'm the child of an ex-Franciscan brother and an ex-nun, and I felt that people who were born of religion or of faith but who weren't right-wing reactionaries weren't really represented in the corporate media. So I've tried to make the right enemies and make going up against America's religious fundamentalism as entertaining as possible. And in that sense, it's a great way to raise awareness of how, you know, I view Jesus like I view Elvis. I love the guy, but a lot of the fan clubs scare the hell out of me. So in terms of using social media for deliberate political propaganda purposes and how you can use it to build coalitions and take on the right while also forming unlikely allies by diversifying the kind of content you put out.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You both were talking backstage, you were telling me that you actually have been using Twitter to test some of your comedic lines, and the more retweets you have, the more successful something will be. So both of you, think about what has been effective in terms of rallying communities around your causes.
Well, I mean, I like to say that NASA and, like, you know, a picture of Mars is like our Kim Kardashian. I think we can get more people to come to a science page simply by, you know, talking about, or the space shuttle. But what's been really effective for us, I think, is one, being able to sort of tell a piece of a story, right, that has high impact. Social media is great for that. You know, a visual, something that actually takes, you know, this very complicated problem, but gives people an instant digestible way of dealing with it. And we actually, you know, humor is, I have on this thing about how can we make science funnier, because one of the things that I think that we found social media to be hugely helpful for is it makes, it can, the humor element, the ability to kind of ricochet, to have these conversations, can make these incredibly huge problems relatable. Which is something that we really struggle with.
Really striking a chord.
Right, and kind of taking something that's incredibly overwhelming. You know, you can tell people statistics, you know, 4 million children a year die of preventable, you know, nutrition-related deficiencies in their mothers within the first 2 days. You know, horrible fact, and we all go, oh my God, that's horrible, and then you think, I can't do anything about 4 million people. But you can, you know, connect to a picture, you can spread the word about a story, or when we have a specific challenge that says we need better ideas about how to get folic acid to the poorest women in the world, and you think, okay, you know, I might have an idea about that. Suddenly, you've taken a very high level, almost abstract type of problem, and you've given somebody a way of holding on to a piece of it.
And John, I know you have about 70,000 Twitter followers, so you obviously are connecting to people and getting a lot of retweets and people rallying around your messages. What's working for you?
Well, you know, in the comedy world, that's not all that much. I have a lot of my friends, like Mr. Thurston here in the front row, who, you know, enjoy huge followings, and I like to see that. Billy Wilder said, if you're going to tell people the truth, make it funny or they'll kill you. And I find a great way to try, whatever side of the political aisle you're on, a great way to reach a wider audience is to write something that's, you know, obviously funny and get your point across, where you can use the humor as, if you would, the lubrication. The humor is the delivery system for the truth. And when you do that and can couch your tweet in something that's not just propaganda, but also kind of fun to read, in that case, you reach a lot more people, including people that don't agree with you, but will appreciate for the humor and then come back and follow.
Right.
And in that sense, I try to not tweet all of the same content. I try to have a healthy amount of political stuff, anti-religious fundamentalism stuff, pop culture, straight up, and then just complete nonsense. I also, for a long time, worked as an on-camera personality for VH1 back when they were a music channel run by people who could spell the word music, and before it became the B-lister in a hot tub network. And in that sense, I did specials with Paul McCartney and George Harrison, and
Is
I
that
had
their
this.
new tagline? Be
Pardon me?
Lister in the hot
Well,
tub?
God bless VH1. It's great to know that Flavor Flav is ruining the Public Enemy's legacy that well. But in that sense, because that was a bit of capital I had from a previous job, and I had this bit of credential of being a classic rock guy. Because of that, I would also post a lot of music stuff and develop that following in that regard. And I found that if you want to reach one segment of the population and be a big fish in a small community, you can certainly do it. But I prefer really as an entertainer to diversify and try to not cast a wide net, cast many different nets. And I don't really, in my case, I didn't see any virtue in having the content be consistent on one level, but to do as many different things as possible. And when you do that, and you make it entertaining, when you do put out stuff to try and save the world, you'll have a wider audience to reach, and you'll also have a diverse pocket of fans where the people who follow me for the jokes here, the people who follow me for the religious stuff here, will all be able to coalesce in unexpected coalitions.
Well, let's talk about the sub-communities, because I think it is really interesting that with technology now you're able to find these sub-communities. Maybe people are into, kite surfing, maybe they're into, fishing, whatever it would be. You obviously have different pockets. You've got different things that you're doing with different types of scientists. How are you finding influencers to support your causes?
Well, in my case, it's just, it's finding who retweets you and finding the people with significant amount of followers of their own who are allies to whatever cause you're promoting, be it political or an entertainment thing or a product you're pushing or a cause you're pushing, and then building the coalitions of people who have a healthy amount of followers, retweeting them, direct messaging with them, or Facebooking directly with them to find out, if I promote your thing, can you promote my thing? I have people writing me, usually about several dozen a day, asking me to promote different causes and events and things like that, which I try to do as often as possible. But really, in my case, the diversification really helps in that way because you just create a lot of different pockets of friends who can help you promote what you're trying to promote.
And any sub-communities or influencers that are supporting?
It's an interesting question. I mean, we probably, the science community broadly, we ourselves as an initiative could do a better job of sort of identifying those pockets of influencers. But what I found actually is what we're able to do is to sort of also elevate people through our social media who we think should be influencers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we think that it's really important, for example, for people to know, and they don't, because by the way, science, gets so little coverage in the mainstream media. It's just unbelievable, right? So you have these people who are doing these incredible things. I was just last week hosting a panel with a scientist who's a rock star in the science community. If we tweet about him or post about him, a guy named George Church at Harvard, who just encoded, he just wrote a book, he just encoded 20 million copies of his book in DNA, right? Like what? 20 million copies of a book in DNA. For us, yes, if George Church tweets us, that's great to our science community, but not to all these different pockets of communities. But we also view our role as telling all these different pockets of communities, hey, George Church is amazing.
Right, right.
And that starts to build, actually, we think, a community of common purpose outside of the ordinary lanes that we travel, which I think is also a role that's really, really powerful that social media can do, is it can say, you may not have thought you were interested in, the intersection of genetics and technology, but this guy just did this amazing thing and it's going to blow your mind. And sitting where we are, we can tell you about it and through that story draw in other influencers who may not necessarily have thought that they were interested in science. But
well, in the past, obviously we've all heard of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and the world was separated by 6 degrees. You probably are really good at that game based on your background.
I've worked with him, so I'm one.
You're one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so then I'm
now
2,
we're, yeah.
3. Now they say that we're down to 3 or 4 degrees of separation because of technology. What do you think in terms of how ideas are spread now that our connections are reduced? Is that a good thing? I mean, what in your line of work does that excite you?
I mean, social media was supposed to bring us closer together, and then in many cases it just made us farther away from the people we were in the room with. That's actually really good. I should write that down. Hang on a second. Hang on.
I thought you were calling Kevin
Okay,
Bacon,
I'm done. Sorry.
maybe.
I think another big key to it also is the power of celebrity. I know that for many causes you really hope to get a prominent name to lend their celebrity to it. I think celebrity is the silliest thing humans have ever invented. But that kind of capital can be used in powerful ways, and I found that, on an individual level as just an entertainer, if I tweet something out and a big star retweets it, that exposes you to so many more people, obviously. Like I did a piece a year ago. It was the anniversary of my father's death, and I was with my family, and they were all insane. So I just tweeted my dad's life story, how I just, in a short series of tweets, I didn't know what else to do, and I was lonely, and I just tweeted my dad's life story with photos of him in his old Franciscan robes and how he fell in love with a nun and quit the clergy. And it was just a little thing I did for myself. I never talk about myself. I try to never talk about myself. And it was the one time I did. And to my astonishment, everyone from Judd Apatow to Kirstie Alley retweeted the whole thing. And I wound up, NPR called me to go on and do the whole story for them in a week. And, for me, I reached so many more people by doing what I swore I'd never do, getting personal and talking about myself. And as a consequence, I reached a much bigger audience.
Right. Well, there's actually some really interesting research about that, about our circle of empathy, and that people actually do relate to words and pictures. And so in the past, maybe we had, a circle of empathy that was, 10 to 15 people, and now we're up to about 100, and that people actually really connect.
And especially in political matters, if you're trying to build a coalition politically, a graphic with a quote on it will go viral instantly. I mean, this has really become interesting to me. I'll have like little snappy one-liners. I like to talk in paragraphs, and as a writer, Twitter is the greatest tool I've ever had to force me to learn how to edit and get it down to 120 characters. Y'all are smarter than me. It's not 140, it's 120. You want the retweets. And in my case, people have begun going into my Facebook profile and taking old photos of me and then slapping my tweets over it as a political quote and then like plastering it all over political websites. So there was a comment I made about having a government based on Christian. I said, if you don't want to use your tax dollars to help the poor or help the sick, then that's great, but don't ever say you want a government based on the Christian religion. Snarky little comment, but someone slapped it on an old photo of mine, and it was retweeted. I was reposted on Facebook over 10,000 times, and I wound up on all these different political sites.
Right.
And in terms of using politics, you get so much farther with an image and something people can share and a fun picture to get your propaganda across than just the propaganda. It's about taking the technical, taking the verbal, and making it fun.
I mean, John, you're obviously doing a lot of political commentary, and we obviously were talking about politics backstage. We're moving into an election period. We've got another debate tomorrow. What do you think about social media? Obviously, Obama used it a lot for the last campaign, but what do you think the social impact is going to be for this upcoming campaign?
It's only good if young people vote. And it only works if the young people who are engaging in it, who they're reaching, actually show up to vote. And we'll see if they're actually devoting their resources properly.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I feel totally equipped to weigh in on the election per se, but we were talking about, social media is wonderful, and you asked earlier about the sort of the celebrity thing, and I think it's a minefield in some ways. In the kind of work we do, right? If you just look at Kony 2020, you look at the Kony video and everyone's like, oh my gosh, but 1 million people watched it. And I don't think we can afford to be arrogant about, because the problems are too big and we need too many people to be arrogant about who's spreading our message. But I think the lesson there is that one, we should still demand accurate, credible information, or we should give people the responsibility and accountability of going and amplifying what they learn on social media through other sources. People sort of acted all betrayed by the Kony video, and as though the internet blew up after and disappeared, and they didn't have any agency to go inform themselves about the real facts. But the thing that you're pointing to, I think that's relevant to what we do in the election thing, is how do you translate interest into action? How do you have a retweet turn into a vote, or in our case, have people actually go out and engage, their intellectual capital, their resources? And I think we're still playing at the margins of how you effectively do that.
We used to protest carrying signs and marching, and now it's just click.
Right.
Well, yeah,
and what does that mean for
I've read case histories on that before, where people will think that the act of retweeting is actually their action, where you say, it's really like, we want donations, and they'll retweet. So what are you doing to make sure that people are actually taking action? I mean, you have an organization where you need people to put in bids and proposals and do on the ground work.
So we have done a model that, in some of our work, one of our models, which is very old. It was actually used to get Charles Lindbergh to fly across the Atlantic, and to solve the problem of longitude at sea, which is leveraging incentive-based prizes. Where it's what we do is we say, okay, we're going to frame a very critical challenge and very concretely with specific parameters of success, and leverage digital media to get it out, broadcast to as many people as possible, but focus their attention through an incentive. And that doesn't always have to be money. Gamification demonstrates for us, badging demonstrates that something as little as recognition, as credit, as sort of being visible in a community of people you care about, can really motivate people. But I think that giving people something concrete to attach to, but making that recognition turn on something more than just pressing a click
And
button.
do you have any scientists that are collecting virtual badges, or what are they,
Well,
what
yeah,
are they
we haven't
motivated
done it.
by?
So we have folks, really recognition. We did a project with the Gates Foundation recently that was on a sort of a closed beta platform that we've done that was a question and answer, getting people to sort of give up information and talk about a complicated subject of connecting human, animal, and veterinary scientists. What we did is we actually had fellows that went out and pulled out the comments of the week and posted them. And because we had a community of some broad influencers, people really wanted to be, kind of like the employee of the month. It's an old trick. We didn't make it up. It's not, the employee of the month trick works in a community where you care about the people who you're interacting with. And so we've done that. We've, like I said, given small scale incentive prizes. We post and profile users who are particularly active on our newsletter and on our blog.
Great. And John, obviously you're spending a lot of time on the content that you're developing, and you're now going to have 5 shows. What kind of change?
One show 5 nights a week.
One show 5 nights a week.
And 3 tours. So.
Okay, well, it sounds pretty busy, but what are you looking for? What kind of change are you trying to create? You obviously want to get some action out there. Are you trying to change perceptions, behaviors?
Well, it depends on the topic. As someone who traffics in politics, I am a big fan of political humor. And I really got heavily into this because I got frustrated not seeing my point of view in the corporate media too much when it came to religious fundamentalism. I was really inspired to get into politics as an entertainer because when I would see the media presenting someone as Christian, it was always a hardcore right-wing fundamentalist. And I don't really consider myself religious. I'm a big fan of God and Jesus and all that, but I knew so many positive people of every faith who were doing great things and never got on TV. All you see are, if you will, the hardcore fundamentalist right-wing douchebags. And they're the ones causing all the problems. The overwhelming majority of moderate or liberal or sane or anti-evil Christians, Jews, and Muslims are getting along just fine right now, today, and they're never going to be on TV. So it's at a point now when, if you were to just land from another planet and watch our media, all you would think about of Christianity are there's atheists and there's creeps screaming at women outside clinics, and there's nothing in the middle. And so I really am not so much in terms of lifting up any faith, but in taking the Bible away from the douchebags. So for me, that became
Sounds
a very...
like it could be a hashtag.
Thank you. It became a very moral purpose because in my case, they say that the largest growing religious group in America is Mormons. Not true. The largest growing religious group in America are people who were raised religious and are now considering themselves spiritual because they're turned off to hypocritical men in dresses. So, for me, it was a matter of how do I reach out to people of faith without being anti-religion, just being anti-hypocrisy.
Right.
And it amazed me that when I began actually directing my material as a comic that way, both on the radio and in clubs and even in military shows, the response was more overwhelming than any jokes about politicians I ever got. And I found that there was a real hunger out there of people who maybe they're still spiritual or they're not, but they have nothing against religion, but they just don't like the American Taliban, if you will. We saw in the Times this morning how the American Family Association is trying to get America's public schools to drop National Mix-It-Up Day, where children are encouraged to hang out with kids who aren't their cliquish friends to try to bring more inclusivity and friendship. American Family Association says that promotes the homosexual agenda. And these people pass for Christian, even though Jesus never said a damn thing about gay people. So for me, using social media and scorning these people using social media, while it may sound completely as a form of propaganda or political pushback, is actually community building. And there's so many people out there who feel this way, And there's also, people who are progressive around the country, but they're afraid to have a Barack Obama bumper sticker on their car when they go to their job or their church. And in doing political material, even if it was narrow in focus, it amazed me how many people of so many different backgrounds responded. And on the religious hypocrisy level, both conservatives and progressives came together.
Right.
And so for me, and then on a purely capitalistic level, reaching out to these people with live tours and live shows
Yeah.
and marketing to them, because they're a significant buying force who feel they're not being represented in the media.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here today. I know you have very busy schedules, so thanks for being on my panel. I hope that you guys will check out John's show on Current TV, and then also go to Scientists Without Borders. They're doing great work, and we've really only touched kind of the iceberg of everything that you're doing. So thank you very much. Please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you all.